Okay, I think we're live now. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Olga Kravchenko, the Director of Programs at Creative Armenia, and we're so happy to bring to you this conversation. It's an exciting conversation through our Artbox Pre-Accelerator program. As you know, it's one of our Creative Armenia's mission to bring a paradigm shift in the way artists think, the strategies, the tools, and the mindset they have for their creative endeavors. And so this conversation is especially important for that because it will give an eye towards the deeper and ever increasing connection of art to economy, art to technologies, and art to entrepreneurship. So without further ado, I want to go through some housekeeping notes and then introduce our talented entrepreneurs and panelists. So first housekeeping rule is about the language and interpretation. As you already know, this conversation will be held in English. But we do have a live simultaneous interpretation. So anyone who wants to listen to it in Armenian, we will ask you to go to the bottom part of your screen and choose, and you can see there the globe symbol icon, and you should click on that and select Armenian if you want to hear the conversation in Armenian. And if you want to continue listening to it in English, then you can choose English. And also at the end of our conversation panel discussion, we will have a Q&A session. And those of you who want to ask our panelists questions, you can already start asking it as we bounce off some ideas and discuss some topics. So feel free to go to the Q&A section of the, again, on the bottom part of your screen and leave your questions there. And if you have a specific person in mind who you want to answer the question, you can also mention that at the end of your question so we know. If it's for both, then you can mention it's for both. And another note is about people joining us live through Facebook or Instagram. You will be able to hear the conversation and see us, but you will see us speaking in English. So again, if you want to hear the conversation in Armenian and to also ask questions, then you can quickly register. My team is now putting a link in the comment section. So go through that process, join us shortly and leave your questions, join us in Armenian. I will just take a couple of seconds to say this thing in Armenian so Armenian audience can also understand. Եթե դուք մեզ միանում եք եւ ցանկանում եք հայերենով հետևել խոսակցությանը, ապա կարող եք ձեր վեբինարի ներքևի գոտում տեսնել գլոբուսի նշանը, սիմվոլը, կարող եք դրա վրա սեղմել եւ կտեսնեք հայերեն տարբերակը, Armenian. Դուք պետք է Armenian տարբերակը նշեք, ընտրեք, որպեսզի խոսակցությանը հետևեք արդեն հայերենով։ Եվ նույնպես, եթե մեզ միանում եք Facebook-ից կամ Instagram-ից, դուք հարցեր չեք կարող տալ եւ չեք կարող հետևել հայերեն լեզվով, դրա համար ձեզ կխնդրենք հիմա ձեր կոմենտների բաժնից կտեսնեք այնտեղ registration-ի link-ը, կարող եք այնտեղ սխմել ու մեզ միանալ կարճատև ժամանակահատվածում։ And my final note is about donations. So if you like this conversation and you would like us to help you bring more such talented and masterminds in entrepreneurship, then you can feel free to also donate to us. The link is also in the comment section. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. It's my great pleasure to introduce Olga Kravchenko, who is the founder and CEO of Musemio, an immersive learning platform that allows children to adventure on interactive quests, featuring co-creative narrative content from partner institutions worldwide. Olga is an experienced mentor and has been recognized as an emerging leader by Sky Women in Technology Scholarship, named as the Rising Star by Computer Weekly, and recognized in the 2021 Forbes 30 Under 30 Art and Culture list. Olga, welcome to our panel. And our second speaker is Fabrice Guerrier, who is a Haitian-American science fiction and fantasy writer, a columnist, and the founder and CEO of Syllble, a pioneering sci-fi and fantasy production house. Fabrice was selected as a 2022 Pan Emerging Voices Fellow finalist by PAN America, named as one of the one of the 100 most influential African Americans by the Root magazine in 2021, and recognized in the 2021 Forbes 30 Under 30 Art and Style list. Fabrice, welcome to the panel. It's really great to have you both here. So my first question, which is actually to both of you, is as people in the creative industries, I'm sure you always come across great ideas that start great and then kind of slowly die away, or they don't go further than that. So like having your success stories in mind, Syllble and Musemio, how do you identify that an idea is something that has potential and can grow into a business, in a successful business startup? And also, do you have some set of questions that you ask yourself every time you come up with an idea and try to create something great out of it? So any of you can go ahead.
Olga.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead first. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the panel. Very excited to be here, and lovely to meet you, Fabrice. We are on the same list, but we've never met before. So yeah, in terms of, I guess there are so many ideas floating around, and the biggest difference that helps you to assess whether the idea has any potential to turn into a viable business or the potential for longevity is actually user research. I think a lot of people like the idea of having an idea, but they don't actually like the idea of having an honest conversation with your users, with people that you assume are having a problem that you're trying to solve. And unless you really dig deep and prepare for uncomfortable feedback, that is the best feedback, actually. You want people to tell you what's wrong with your idea or with your solution rather than tell you that it's great, because that's not something that will help you to grow. So I think that's kind of the first thing that, that makes a difference between an idea and a potentially viable business. And secondly, it's grit. I think that we talk about resilience, we talk about entrepreneurial grit. There is quite a big difference. I think once you are in a slightly mature stage of your business, grit is like perseverance, and you understand that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And sometimes your decisions early days don't seem necessarily very well thought when you look at it like from like when you try to connect the dots. But as long as you persevere and you actually try to validate your idea and to actually make it work, if you see the sign that the user actually wants it, that's what makes a difference, and that's what helps you to thrive. So I guess that's the first question answered, and I'll pass the mic to Fabrice.
Thank you so much, Olga and Anush. I'm so honored to be here, and it is interesting that we're in the same list and we have never met. So it's really great to be here and share ideas. I think it's such a powerful question, because my mind has changed around this a lot, because initially I felt that there was always like this sort of grand idea that I need to pursue, this grand thing. But I started to realize it's like there are thousands of great ideas out there. And I think it's almost as if it's like we have to come to terms that those great ideas, as we pursue them, as we iterate on them, as we pilot those small processes, they're going to evolve and they're going to change, because as you understand your customer, as you sort of align more, you merge so your vision and the feedback and the data, and then you're engaging with the community you're hoping to transform. I think that my sort of advice is that for me, because there's so many different types of it, I feel like you have to find something. At least in my personal experience, it was something that was closely aligned with my gut, my feelings, my sort of passion. And I felt like as a writer, like writing by myself was something that was so lonely. And initially, I think the idea that I had was sort of like, because I had written 2 horrible novels and going back to Haiti with the Pan America Center, and those 2 novels really, I took one of them and I wanted to get it edited. And the initial idea was to connect a writer to an editor. But initially, once I asked people, what problems do you have? Like, is this something that you would need to use? So I like what Olga says in terms of the survey and the research. And what I found out is that a lot of the pain points I had faced as a writer, a lot of other writers are facing the same pain points, like loneliness, not being able to understand the industry, not being able to sit down and write and be held accountable to other people. So I think the first thing is to find something that aligns with your gifts and your vision, and also sort of like what you want to do. But also secondly, knowing that there are great ideas everywhere, and that no matter which idea that you pick, it's gonna evolve and it's gonna change. And I think you're absolutely right, Olga. It's like the early days. It's like Syllable now and Syllable before. There are sort of sprinkles of truth that connects it, but it's evolved a lot. And it's like, are we willing to change and engage in terms of that kind of, like, you learn sort of, they always teach you you're sort of piloting a small experiment with your consumer and your customer. And then from that experiment, you're able to adapt and grow and evolve and sort of build a robust product that adds more value and creating greater and greater value for your customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And just something that I wanted to add after listening to you, Fabrice, the best piece of advice I've ever got sounds like that. Do not fall in love with a solution, fall in love with a problem. Because if you can continue being truthful and honest on your mission to solve the problem, you will find it exciting and you will find it empowering, that your initial idea, your initial assumption will be wrong, probably 90% wrong, because that's just what happens. Like, you don't know everything, and the only thing that you don't know anything. So that just kind of, I would encourage anyone who is starting, who is having an idea, to really understand what is the problem and love it, and like really try to do the best to solve it, rather than just kind of clinging to what they believe is the best solution going forward.
Yeah, these are all great advices and pieces of wisdom. So I think our artists will really appreciate it. And you kind of already started like segueing into my second question, which is about the creative part. I know that Fabrice is a writer and Olga is also a creator herself. So I wanted to understand, because your background started from the creative aspect, how did that influence the entrepreneurship? I'm imagining that in some cases it was difficult because entrepreneurship is a more practical and grounded, and while creativity is perceived usually as a stereotype, as something that is, you're outside the box, you're like free-floating ideas, etc. So how did you connect both? Where was that merge for you, and what kind of challenges rose out of that, and also what kind of strengths did your background give to you in that result?
I can go for this. I think that, yeah, that's a great question, because that's something I haven't figured it out yet, but I feel like that's something I've been thinking a lot, the idea of art and commerce, and how do you commercialize the art? Because as an artist, we're sort of driven by vision, by passion, by ideas. And I feel like if you have a vision, you're able to sort of to enlist other people in your journey. And I think that's an advice that I've gotten is how can you connect with people who have certain skill sets or doing things that are sort of aligned with what you're doing, but also are they smarter than you, or do they have a certain habit? So I think there's a level of self-awareness that's also required as a creative artist, because you have to really be, I think because entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and because it's going to be a long journey. At least for me, I see it as it's a long-term journey, the next 10, 20 years. And there are going to be nights where you're going to be wondering, like, why am I doing this? What's happening? Like, and because the art and commerce is such it's an industry that is not only highly subjective, but also it requires a sort of a robust process to kind of engage stakeholders, partnerships, get wins, and push more out of the product. So I think for me, it's really having that conversation about like what are my gifts, what are my values, why am I doing this, and what are the sacrifices am I willing to make? Because I know for me, like I'm sort of the dreamer type and I'm the creative type, and you always hear like there are people that are some more operations, there are people that are more marketing, there are people that are more the vision, and they tell you about like founder, co-founder fit, or even community or partnership fit. So I think it's really figuring out like how do those sort of all align into sort of a great symphony? Like, and are there certain skill sets that you lack as an individual? And how can you remedy that with partnering with other people, pitching your ideas to stakeholders, and sort of getting the ground running? Because I think I've who I was when I first started, it's almost as if I needed to change as well. It's like, it almost feels like the business, especially as an artist, I feel like there's a life force to the organization, and the organization demands so much out of you, or the idea demands so much. I feel ideas are alive and they sort of like, they kind of push us towards sort of making them a reality. And I'm continually changing. I'm having to learn new skill sets. I'm having to put myself outside of my comfort zone and ask for help. I'm having to like really reflect on the process, because who you are now will also, as the same thing as like the idea is going to be very different. Don't get attached to the idea. It's the same thing as well too. It's like, who will you need to be to sort of fully embrace how this idea is going to evolve? Because I didn't necessarily have the skill sets, and there's a lot of skill sets that I'm still working on. But there are those things that you will have to have that conversation and say like, can I get help from other people and other organizations? Because along the way, and I know where the idea of mentorship also is something that you're going to talk. I'm like bleeding into all the different processes, but yeah. So that's, I guess, my 2 cents around that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think as we were speaking, I thought of Walt Whitman's lines, like, I'm large, I contain multitudes. It's kind of true, because you develop all these different personalities, and
I love that.
and quotes that you wear as you go along. Olga, do you want to add to that? What's your process?
I know you just made me laugh when you talked about multiple personalities. Definitely, as an entrepreneur, you do have multiple personalities, and they're just a part of the journey. So you need to learn to actually embrace it. For me, I think that, so my background, so I did my BA in drama. I initially came to the UK many, many years ago to be an actress. My accent wasn't going away, and it's still not going away. And I sound as Ukrainian as I sounded on the very first day of my arrival to the UK. So rather than actually focusing on a theater career, I kind of got into the events, and I helped to organize the events and imagine them. So most of the time before I found Musemio and my other business as well, I was working as a creative producer. So helping people to imagine, how can we engage the audience, how can we tell the stories in a way that's going to give the best time ever to people who are deciding to dedicate their evenings to our events or to our concert or something like that. And I remember that when I graduated from my drama degree, please forgive me, all my teachers, I thought that, oh my God, I just wasted 3 years of my life. What I didn't understand, that when I started my entrepreneurial journey, actually all the exercises, all the encouragement from my lecturers and from my teachers and from the modules actually made me think outside of the box. And I think that's the best and the most amazing transferable skills that my drama degree gave me. Again, it was contemporary drama. It was a lot of interesting things, but I just couldn't understand how I can possibly apply them in the real world, in the practical life. And only, I guess, only a couple of years later, probably around 2 years into the journey of Musemio, someone asked me, it's like, Olga, how do you come up with like all these random solutions? I would never think about them. And I'm like, yeah, but they're obvious. Like, they're just like how my brain works. And obviously, without training in arts and in drama, I would not be able to see the world differently. So I still think that one of the greatest superpowers that I have is thanks to my drama degree and thanks to my arts background, because I do stand outside the box when I think about solutions. But another skill that I think that sometimes we don't necessarily appreciate is the ability to present ourselves. Artists and creatives know how to talk about their art, and when you're starting your business, your art is your business and it's your baby, and like as Fabrice said, it's like it's a living creature pretty much, and you just like take care of it. And also you learn how to present in the best possible way. So for me, knowing exactly what I need to do in front of the big audience, knowing exactly how to pitch it to smaller audiences, how to read the room, all the skills that I learned from my degree and from my experiences before and from my work in the theater. Oh, I think we lost Anush. I think we did. But anyway, I'll finish the story. Hopefully she's going to be back with us. I think the self-presentation will really help you to communicate your ideas and the uniqueness of what you're doing. And at the end, you will get a lot of evangelists and advocates for what you're doing that forms the part of your success, because networks are everything. And as part of your journey, you always try to build them.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that as Anush comes back. I think I really appreciate what you're saying, because it took me a while to embrace sort of my past and my journey, because I came at it from the international relations. And I had to sort of these bigger questions about like, how can we change our planet? How can we evolve our system in our society? And I studied international relations at Florida State University, and then went on to get my master's in conflict transformation and peace building. So like, I'm the person that goes in a country that is facing a lot of protracted conflict, and also all aspects of conflict. So better part, I had to sort of wrestle about like, how is my background connected to like science fiction and fantasy and world building and entertainment. And I feel like I've had to sort of make that connection and see that my background enriches who I am as an entrepreneur, and that it gives me a lens that a lot of people or a lot of writers or a lot of other artists might not have. So I feel like I really came to terms with that art and storytelling are at the crux of helping us as a society see more of what this world is and what it can be. So I always go back to the imagination as like something so fundamental to transform. So I feel like the work of the cultural entrepreneur, at least for me, those values is to create social change, because you cannot engage in a level of, for me at least, is like you cannot engage in the level of art and entrepreneurship and cultural entrepreneurship without really thinking about where our planet is and how are we going, where are we going as a human species. So I've made very much, I've sort of my vision in terms around the international world and like and social change and impact really connected deeply with science fiction and fantasy and the imagined worlds and helping people see new possibilities.
Yeah, I kind of lost the connection for a minute, but I also, because we're all from different parts of the world and with different backgrounds, I wanted to ask also, Olga, since you're Ukrainian and also Fabrice is Haitian, I wanted to ask how your cultural backgrounds have influenced the work that you do. And is there like a silver lining to keep, because this is something that we also identify with as Armenians. What's the silver lining of having that unique value of Armenianness and Armenian hints and different cues, but also not going over the board and not making it too traditional and unrelatable to the international market and art scene. So what do you think about that? Olga, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead with this question. So there are a couple of aspects like to cover within the question about your national identity and how it helps you or how it stops you sometimes when you are running a business. I was very, very lucky. I came to the UK when I was still like a teenager. I came to the UK when I was 16. So by the time I co-founded my business, I already has integrated and learned how to deal with a different mentality, because Ukrainians are very warm-hearted, we are very loud, and I'm still being told that I'm way too loud sometimes, and my replies usually just deal with it. But in general, that's one of the aspects that I had to not to change, but to sometimes to understand when it's appropriate to be my loud self, and actually when sometimes I can be a little bit over the top. Another big mentality slash, I guess, national identity aspects. As Ukrainians, we are very straightforward. We are very straightforward. We don't really like beat around the bush. We ask the questions. And I remember when I was starting my journey, and actually one of my mentors told me that they know I don't mean it, but sometimes I come across as rude. And it wasn't about me trying to be rude or saying something that was rude, but not understanding and not taking into account some of the cultural conventions. So I think it's a fine balance. There is a good aspect of me being Ukrainian. I'm very self-confident. I'm very outspoken. I am straightforward, and it helps me to close the business a little bit quicker than, for example, if I was coming from a Western European country, let's say. And obviously the resilience levels that my nation is generally showing are quite high. So this is like a really good aspect. And that's what I'm translating whenever I'm speaking to investors, partners, anyone else. I'm translating the part of me. But then I'm also aware that sometimes people can find it a little bit overwhelming, and I need to learn how to read the signals and maybe just ease them into Olga as she is, and just give them a little bit of a sliding scale of Olga as we build a relationship to start with.
Yeah. And for
that's an incredible question. I think it's even for me, it's played even a meta role in my life, because when I first moved to the US, I always say that's when I discovered I was Black for the first time. Because in Haiti, I was surrounded by Black people and Haitian culture, my family, people that look like me. And in Haiti, my skin color, or in the US, my skin color made all the difference. And I was like, what does it mean to be a Black immigrant in the US, and where there's a lot of racism and there's a lot of injustices that are still plaguing that society. And I think for me, my first attempt was to assimilate. How do I become American? How do I reject my accent? How do I reject my past? And how do I adapt and become American? But oftentimes being American in my sort of vision was like to adapt to like a white culture or a white prototypical vision. And I think the more I did that, it erased part of myself. It was extremely destructive to who I was, my psyche. And even up to today, I'm having to unlearn all of that sort of assimilation or that trauma. So it's mostly in the recent years, and also it aligns with my journey with Syllble, that I've started to reconcile that my past as Haitian and my history and the values that come from my own individual culture are like profound roots that are integrated into sort of time and space. And I feel much more grounded when I anchor that sort of worldview, because I show up as Haitian American, and everywhere I go, and sort of the Maya Angelou thing is, she says it's like she walks in a room, she comes at one, but she stands with 10,000, and she's talking about like her ancestors, and she's talking about her sort of history and her values when she comes in. So I feel like embracing my culture of being Haitian in the first Black country in the world, I feel like it gives me solace that every action that I'm doing, I'm standing on the shoulders of people who came before me. And that as a Haitian, there's also a sort of broad meta sort of Black cultural experience in America too. And I can also feed and get inspiration from that thing, because I think being a cultural entrepreneur, it's really about, I think it's a lot of the inner work as well, because you're engaging meaning, you're engaging art. And I think you have to be sort of radically and unapologetically like rooted in yourself, but in a way that allows you to connect with others. Because oftentimes that rooting is shone upon because people are like, no, you got to be sort of the multicultural thing. But it's like, I think there's a level of embracing my culture and who I am, my skin color, my ideas, my past, my like all of those things matter. And it's not something that needs to be erased. So I feel like that's something I'm still learning as well. But I feel like it's being Haitian is at the crux of my identity. And I've been writing around Haitian history and Haitian mythology on a bigger sort of novel that I'm crossing my fingers pushes through into the world. But like, yeah, my identity as Haitian is like so crucial, and it didn't used to be at the early times. It was very much like, okay, how do I escape that, because it's like a point of shame. So it's a lot of the inner work, and it's a lot of alignment. It's a lot of coping with sort of that process. So.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And yeah, these are also great points. I think as Armenians too, the history and that ancestral like echoes, it's like one of the biggest assets as creators move forward, and that gives the unique value to the work they do. And yeah, kind of as you said, like make it more rooted and grounded. So yeah, my next question I think is for Olga, connected to mentorship, because I know as you were starting, you received a lot of support and you received funding, but beyond that, you also got a lot of mentorships from Sky Women and consultation. So I wanted to understand, where do you find do you find that the mentorships are like very important, pivotal part of the journey, and that people starting creators should get more of that? And how do you see yourself, like what kind of people should starting entrepreneurs surround themselves? I know that that's how you started working with Caitlin, as someone that you said you saw the potential and the need to collaborate. So yeah, can you touch upon those 2 points?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think that, well, as I said, I'm doing some mentoring for early startups right now myself, and I can see it from another side, obviously on the side that like I was before. But what I think mentorship is essential when you're starting, especially when you don't have experience and you don't have an idea of actually how you can end up running the business. I am an accidental entrepreneur. I never in my life I thought I'm going to run a virtual reality educational startup for children. I never thought I'm going to be helping my CTO to build stuff and something doesn't work on his computer, or we have now power outages and I need to do some of the coding myself. Never in my life I thought that this will be the part of my journey. And initially, when I had the idea of not Musemio at this point, it was called Museum 2.0, and it was about creating more engagement with young people in the museums through virtual reality. That was pretty much the context. And then as I started trying to understand my audiences, I knew that it's not about placing VR inside the museum. It's about giving the opportunity for young people to get engaged with culture wherever they are in the world. And we're going to do it through mobile app, and we're going to do it for young children, and the most impact we can create is certain age. But I would not be able to get to this conclusion if I haven't had dozens of people talking to me nonstop and asking provocative questions and sharing their lived experiences with me when I was just starting the journey. I remember that the first bit of mentoring I got was probably from my lecturer when I was doing my master's degree in art and cultural management. We were studying cultural entrepreneurship, and she actually was delivering a practical course called Entrepreneurial Opportunity. When she was telling us what all sums EBITDA and everything, all the random business abbreviation actually mean. And she was the first one to encourage me to seek wider support. That's how I got that's how I got engaged with King's Entrepreneurship Institute through their Ideas Factory competition, because the very first piece of advice I received from my mentor was just give it a go. And then from give it a go, it was like, do not stop asking questions. And then this is how I kind of like got into Accelerator, ran another startup for a couple of months before starting Musemio full time. And throughout this journey, I had endless amount of people I was talking to. Now, without mentors, I would definitely not make it. And I can, like, I literally send them like Merry Christmas messages like 5 years later saying, thank you, you've changed my life. But there are good mentors and there are bad mentors. And that's something that you don't learn to differentiate for a really long period of time. And that's where you waste a lot of your precious time when you're just starting a startup. And because you still, well, at least for me, again, I'm talking from my own experience. When I was just starting a startup, I didn't have enough of confidence in my gut feeling what was right, what was wrong. And sometimes people would encourage me to look in different places, position my startup differently, because in their experience, that would gain more attention of the stakeholders they would think are useful for us. But it wasn't the right advice. And then we would end up spending weeks trying to do something that was not beneficial. Actually, Fabrice, I'm going to ask you another question as part of this mentorship discussion. What is the worst piece of advice that you received?
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to learn to differentiate good and bad mentorship as soon as possible. And finally, there is a point when you don't need a lot of mentorship, when you need very, very targeted advice that is actionable, and but that usually comes at a certain maturity stage. And that's like, especially within female founder circles, there is kind of a motto saying we don't need mentorship, we need funding. And that's partially true, because most of the female founders programs are focused about take all my advice, but I'm not going to give you money. And I'm like, well, we do need mentorship early on, but then we'd really like some funding and some really good advice from people that would actually make a difference and open their black books to help us scale. So that would be kind of my history of mentorship experience.
Yeah, that's great points. And Fabrice, what's your best advice and the worst advice from the mentors?
That's a tough question to I feel like if I tell a story, I might get the advice or the advice my brother, because I agree with Olga, and I think there is such a thing as good mentorship and bad mentorship, and there's such a thing as like the right timing for that mentorship as well. I remember I did it. This is just an example. I remember I did an accelerator, and this was in DC where I used to live there. And they had like I think it was like a speed dating with mentors. And it's like 2 minutes, you're talking to someone in the industry or someone that's sort of a mentor. And then it's like we're in a group of people, maybe I think there's 12 people, and then there was like maybe 12 mentors. And then every 2 minutes you would alternate different people. And I remember I was like, okay, I want to do this with Syllble. They're doing this, like, and the mentor's like, wow, you should focus on this. And it's like, I think that's gonna I think there's a connection here. And I'm like, really? Like, this is amazing. I feel so passionate. And in the next minute, I switch mentors and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And then the other mentor is like, no, I think that's not a good idea. It's like they're pretty much like throwing away what the other mentor had said. And then literally every other mentor or so, it's like, they started to call that mentor whiplash, how it's like, because mentors and people who are older than us have so much influence in terms of our, like, we trust them and this is such a hard journey that like this sort of advice can kind of make sense for us, and we go and pursue it fast, because as entrepreneurs, time is of the essence, and some things in terms of claiming that process. So I feel like we beware of mentor whiplash, because having too many mentors might send you in a perpetual state of oblivion, and you might never actually like actualize your vision. And I feel like for me, the best types of mentors have been the mentors that, like, I don't know, like the mentors that are good people to think with. They don't sort of give advice, but they allow you to question and kind of help you reflect in terms of like, okay, and they ask you more questions. They're not like, okay, you should do this, you should do this, you do this, which sometimes that's helpful. But I feel like the reflective space, because we're our own superpowers, and I feel like we have the answer. It's just sort of having the permission to kind of pursue it. So the best mentors I've seen, and the most often time, has been the mentors that create space for me to reflect in ways I couldn't by myself or with my team. And I feel like I guess that's how I've seen it as well. And also mentorship can come from a lot of different places. It doesn't have to be someone that's older. It could be someone that's younger too. And I feel like it's sort of being open-minded to those things too, but having the internal compass to know what is good, or quote unquote good or bad. I don't know what's a bad advice. I don't know. That's a tough question. I'll have to get back to that to see.
Sure.
I'm received probably, I've definitely received a lot of bad advices, but I've never I've thought about it that way in a sense. So
yeah, another category that came to my mind is the secret mentors, people who don't know they are your mentors, but they are. And, you kind of look up to them, and you like secretly get advice for your work. And I find them to be the best mentors in any situation. And so,
They
okay.
are. Just I want to just add something about you. You've talked about secret mentors, and I think that what Fabrice said, what I think is extremely important to understand when you're running a business. Advice and mentorships comes from all different places, and the best advice, I would say, sometimes comes from fellow founders, because these people who actually lived the experience that is super close to you can give you much more insight and much more actionable steps to tackle a certain problem that will allow you not to make the same mistake. So I have a number of founders that I treat as secret mentors, or like as friends, kind of secret mentors / friends. And I guess whenever you have this pressing problem, or even sometimes the problems that seems to be too small to discuss with the mentor as a founder, you're going to end up a lot of those. You're like, but this is just something in my head, but I feel like it's blocking me. The fellow founders, the community that you build around yourself, of people who are empowered, who are energized, who want to change the world, and that's exactly what culture entrepreneurship is offering you, are the ones that are going to be able to provide incredible amount of help.
Yeah, that's a great
I also want to add to that. I want to stress that as well. It's like, that's a big aha moment that I realized in my journey too. There's people are so happy to give advice, but it's like, have they done it? Or have they done what you're hoping to do? And have they replicated or created or thought of in terms of the angle, the marketing, the department, or whichever things you're doing? I feel like I agree. I think the best, that's something I've made a conscious decision to. It's like, some advice from people might be really great, but it might not be it might be great, it might be awesome, but it's not necessarily the best advice for you or your business at this stage. Because like, if you're looking to do, let's say, a campaign and connect with multiple organizations to raise awareness for your product, like, are you going to talk to someone that has never done a campaign? And I'm just saying, like, sometimes, yes, advice can be helpful in that sense, but I think the closer you can lean into someone that's already done it before, or whatever you're trying to do, I highly recommend that. Because I think like I hate to say wasted, I feel like it's something I've had to learn, is that find the people who've done the things that you want to do, because that's going to save you a lot of pain and a lot of long-term journey. Because yes, you might stumble, because a lot of the entrepreneur journey is luck. So yes, you might stumble into something that works and creates more change, but find the people who have done it before. And fellow founders tend to be those people too. I agree. So.
Great, yeah, and I wanted to add, just in terms of our program at Artbox, where artists are also getting mentorships with great mentors. It's at the end of the day, it's you who is like the carrier of the vision, and all of those steps and all the mentorships that go along with that. They kind of, you are the one responsible for that, to match the vision that you have. In order to get something that is really effective. And so, I completely agree with you. And so I want to ask another question, which is like something I personally am curious about very much. So I'm a writer myself, and I'm kind of obsessed with creative rituals of different writers, like Hemingway's or some other writers. And I wanted to ask you if you have any creative rituals, because being entrepreneurs, I know that it can be sometimes daunting and too grounded and practical. So how do you divide that and keep the balance between entrepreneurship and your creative flow and creative endeavors, and also, which I'm sure brings new progressions and the flexibility of the business itself?
Fabrice, I think you should start.
All right. I think, I feel like, thank you, Olga. I think that I think it's very important to have routines, at least for me. And I've sort of canonized routines specifically in terms, I think this was during the pandemic. I was in DC before I made the decision to move to LA. And I realized, and I think everyone sort of faced that. I could claim that everyone faced that, but where you're sort of faced with your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own psychology, your social structures are so slowly vanishing. And then you're like looking around and you're like, where am I going? Asking these bigger questions. So I think the pandemic for me made me realize that there are 5 to 6 to 7 things that allows me to like vibrate and be present in the day to day. And those 5, 6 things were like running, going for a run, or drinking a lot of water, getting 6 to 7 hours of sleep, eating a lot of greens. Like I'm vegetarian, so it's like really not eating a lot of carbs, but eating more greens and vegetables and legumes. Doing a sort of creative exercise. So if I didn't do these things every day or every other day at least, I feel like I would not be at my best, that I would not be someone that is able to sort of channel all this energy and this sort of flow in terms of creative pursuits, but also entrepreneurial endeavors. So I feel like, I think routines have been crucial for me, but specifically within the context of mental health, because it's like, it seems like I can't necessarily be creative or at my best if I am sort of sleep deprived. And I know there's a hustle culture in entrepreneurship, and I know sometimes that's something I'm dealing with as well. It's like, where does the hustle culture begin and where does it sort of become toxic? Because I think there are healthy things that you have to push for certain ideas, because it is a business. But I do feel like I've valued my mental health increasingly, and I've seen that having a routine around maintaining that mental health buys me more time, allows me to make more connections and to be more creative. So I like some of the routines that I do. I always have a smoothie in the morning. I had a smoothie before this call. Like I try to go to the gym as well. The gym is always a place of reflection. So I think having those things are so important. And yes, it's gonna shift, but I do feel like it's critical. I don't know if I answered that question, or were you looking more specifically quirks of like creative writing?
I was, you kind of did answer my question. I was also thinking of like creative rituals that you have that help you really like focus on the creative aspect of the development of the business. And I don't know, do you write standing up or
Okay, I see what you mean. Yes, I feel like there's so many different rituals. So like lighting a candle, for example, smell has a good way to kind of, I think it's almost seeing yourself as like an experiment. I always go back to like Tim Ferriss. I recommend anyone who's haven't heard of him, Tim Ferriss. I like him in his sort of frameworks because he looks at it as like, how do we experiment on ourselves as creators and find what works for us? And it's like I've talked to different people and friends and mentors, and they've said the same thing. It's like, can you experiment to see what works? Like, can you engage with smell? Can you have a snack? Can you do music? Can you go to a coffee shop or go in nature? Like, there's so many different ways that like you can use to sort of harness out of yourself that creative flow. So I think, yeah, I do have some rituals in terms of my writing. I do like going to a coffee shop sometimes if I have to write, because I've been focusing a lot on this I'm writing the second novel now. And my goal is to have like a dirty draft by the end of the year. So I'm going to go to a coffee shop. I like the background sounds of the coffee process as well. So there are things but I think it's not going to work for everyone. It's just figuring out what works for you, which I think it's also a big stage I had to realize, because I too consume a lot of information around like, how did these other writers like Henri Matisse or Picasso or Hemingway or Toni Morrison or James Baldwin, all these writers and creators and creatives, how they did do it. Because when you're a cultural entrepreneur, and I think Olga mentioned this at the beginning, it's like you're sort of at the center of your art, and it's like you're sort of creating and you have to promote yourself. So I feel like it never helps to know yourself the most, because I think that's the highest form of capital, is investing in knowing who you are, your values, your vision, and also being comfortable in not knowing who you are, and knowing that you're just kind of going with the flow and you're gonna do those things. So I feel like that journey is incredibly important as an artist, so as a creative.
That's a great point. I really like the way you say you are like, the biggest capital is you, and knowing who you are, and developing that grit and that perseverance to move forward with your idea. Yeah. Olga, do you want to add? What's your ritual?
That's a very interesting question. I actually really like the discussion around the routines, and I think I'm less organized than Fabrice. To be honest, I actually noticed that I usually go through 3 different stages, and that's usually like 3 months. Like every 3 months, I go through 3 different stages, and like I think at this point I'm okay with it. I'm just like fine. Just like now I know myself, so I know that whatever I'm going through, whatever I'm experiencing, I'm accepting, and like I'm absolutely normal with it. The first stage is usually planning, and the planning is like a very meticulous planning. I'm like buying a new planner. Usually I never finish a planner. I never finished a planner in my life, because every 3 months I feel I need to restart my life and I need to buy a new planner. So that's, I guess, part of my ritual, and it makes me feel good. The important bit is to throw away the old planner, because if you find it in 3 months' time, you will feel very upset. But yes, and the first part for me, it's always planning. It's kind of like trying to understand if priorities are the same, where we are in terms of the goals that we set ourselves a couple of months ago. And then once I'm getting obsessed about all my plans, the second part is usually the burnout, because you've spent like 30 days trying to be the best version of yourself, trying to make sure you don't skip any of the ticks, or whether it's 20-minute reading or meditation or a run. Then once you miss one, suddenly it destroys kind of like all your efforts. And I think that's a very important learning for me, to actually be okay that sometimes you won't be 100%. And that's a lesson that I apply both in my personal life, in the way I take care of myself, I take care of my family, because we're just humans. But also it's the same advice that I give myself when I'm running Musemio. And I'm like, sometimes I will have a low day. Sometimes I will have 2 emails on my to-do list, and I will like kick myself until like for the next 12 hours because I haven't done anything but these 2 emails. But this is a part of it. And then usually the final part of my cycle, so the first one is planning madness, then it's a burnout, and then it's just like acceptance. That's my favorite one because that's usually where a lot of reflection comes in. And obviously that's where I kind of like get the inspiration to actually restart doing the plans. I am trying now to put less of a day-to-day routine stuff that I feel I need to accomplish, but I'm trying to listen to myself, similarly to Fabrice, like just follow some basic. To have a healthy sleep, do not sacrifice your sleep. You not being able to sleep a night before will destroy your day. You will not be effective. You will not be able to catch up with what you've done during the night. So it's just stupid to do that. Drinking water, eating healthy, and allowing space for yourself separate from business. I think that's an advice I would give for any early stage founder. Your business is your baby. You become attached. Your business is a part of who you are. It is a part of your identity. But it's important to figure out if you can dedicate each Saturday or each Sunday, or if you're lucky, the entire weekend. Probably not for the first couple of years, but just at least this one day when you are not your business, you're doing just something that you as person wants to do. And it's not going to benefit your business. It's not going to make you a better leader. It's not going to do any of those. It's going to make you feel nice as a human being. And that will really help you to recharge. So.
Yeah, those are great points. Yeah, if you're in the long run, if you're there for the long run, then you need to act the person who is there for a long run and take care of yourself too. And that's a great advice for our artists. So on that note, I want to already open our Q&A section of this conversation and ask some questions from our participants and Artbox participants. And so my first question, and I'll ask Sonia Avakian to raise that question, is I guess I had the same question as Anusha's second question, but from a bit different perspective. Sonia, do you want to turn your camera on and ask the question yourself?
Hi, I would love to, but at the moment, I would prefer to ask the question on my behalf if there is a way for you.
Yeah, sure. So Sonia's question is, when your product and idea is shaped in a specific small country where only small audiences in the use, the values are relatable for a larger audience, what resources you can use to engage more people in the world? What would prefer to ask on my behalf, as I think I would not direct the question to specifically someone, whoever has the experience or would prefer to answer would be fine. So.
If you I think that's a wonderful question. I think there's two things here. The first thing is that one of the things that I've found is that early on, entrepreneurs wants to be everything to everyone. We believe and that was the biggest challenge for me, because I'm like, I have this sort of artistic, valuable process. And I think every single person everyone's gonna love this, everyone's gonna do this. And I think entrepreneurship is almost an exercise of going to the particular, which is it's very unconventional, but I feel like if you focus on the very specific community and you make that process or product or value or business sort of function within the frameworks of that specific community, then you'll be able to open up. Because I think a lot of one advice I was given is when I was in DC is sort of nail it and then scale it. You're sort of experimenting at first to figure out what it works. And I think in DC, I took my time and reflection to really reflect about what does collaborative writing as a process looks like for creators, for writers, and what are they learning from it, and how can I get feedback from there? Because I think there is such a thing as early stage users and product market fit users. So I think you have to really embrace your early phase users and understand from them why is this product providing a specific value. So I think the specific helps. I think if you want to get to a larger audience, I think the specific helps initially, and you have to like anchor that reality initially in that frame before going on to the major thing, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Fabrice. And our next question from an attendee is from Najda Hovanesyan. What are the key differences between a cultural entrepreneur with entrepreneurship in other fields? So I'm guessing social entrepreneurship, etc.
That's a great question. I'll take it for now, just because my entire module, I remember at university, was literally focused on what is cultural entrepreneurship, and it was driving me crazy. Because like for me, fundamental difference between cultural entrepreneurship and any other type of entrepreneurship, and I think actually social entrepreneurship sometimes stands in between, because social entrepreneurship is not necessarily something that is relatable to a particular sector. It is the values that the company represents. We are a limited company but we are a social enterprise by articles of association. So like, I think that's this one I would just kind of put in the middle as an umbrella term. But in terms of cultural entrepreneurship, the main value that I believe it holds is promoting collaboration and creativity in whatever solution you're trying to promote, and the creativity and collaboration as a force to foster a better society, a better community, to create a positive change is what unites the idea of entrepreneurship with art. So effectively, it's kind of in the middle, we have culture entrepreneurship. So having the goal, having community in mind, and fostering creativity in any shape or form. And it can be very, very different, because what like both Fabrice and myself, we are culture entrepreneurs. We are doing very different things, but we are promoting creativity and we are encouraging more people to have this creative processes. So I think that's what I would put into the bracket of culture entrepreneurship. Fabrice, is there anything you'd like to add on my little speech, little passionate speech in culture entrepreneurship? So.
No, I think that's absolutely wonderful. I'm taking notes, so this is great.
Yeah, that's a great definition. Thank you, Olga. And our second question is from Sarkis. For Fabrice in particular, what advice would you give to young writers, particularly science fiction writers focused on post-colonial and Afro-futuristic themes, especially in the US context where these ideas aren't really popular or mainstream with other consumers? How do you negotiate the relationship between what you want to write about and what audiences expect?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. I feel like that first, I have to say that you have to write what you want to write about. I think that's the most primacy thing. I know a lot of the places you're sort of looking at, okay, what are the current trends or what are the current processes and can I adapt to these processes? But I think you have to write what you want to write about, what you love, what you care about, because I think that's going to sustain you. I think writing about what you care about is gonna show through the writing and is gonna sustain you, especially if you're writing long form like novels or prose. And I'm not sure which medium you're writing in terms of that context. But I would also say that I think our times are changing, especially in the US. I think we've reached a point, especially after the pandemic, that people are realizing that we are not living in a post-racial society. And with the rise of like Black Panther and a lot of different films and TV that are Black focused, and I feel like people are more susceptible and are open to the idea of what does reparation look like? How do we look at post-colonial like lenses for like sort of reimagining the past? So I would say that I think we are reaching a point where Afrofuturism and post-colonial sort of storytelling modules are going to be the most like popular things, because people want something more. People want something that's going to be thought-provoking and is going to help them deal with sort of the historical legacies and traumas of the past. Because as a cultural entrepreneur, as a writer, for me, I see the pen as like a weapon. It's a tool for societal change, cultural change. And I think that I would say, yeah, I think, yes, it's been on the margins for a lot of the times, but Afrofuturism and post-colonial ideas, I would say very optimistically that I think some of the top books that have been published, I can't name them. I wish I had taken notes before, but some of the most popular books are, like, for example, they're making Octavia Butler's, I forgot it's FX is making a show of Octavia Butler's Kindred. And I feel like I think there's going to be a renaissance around Black thought and Afrofuturism and post-colonial stuff, because society is demanding it and it's been pushed out in the margin. And majority of people are realizing that that's how we're going to change our world, is to confront the past and that history. So I think this is probably the greatest time to write within that lens, and especially also within an Armenian lens as well. I feel like people are looking for storytelling that is diverse. So there is a storytelling drought in Hollywood where they're just recreating old IP, and that many people realize this. And I think more and more people are looking for diverse voices. So I would encourage you to fully immerse yourself in that world and not be afraid, because I think the publishing industry and the entertainment world wants to hear more of that. And I know that's not necessarily a popular opinion, but that's what I'm sensing. It's just sort of kind of navigating it and getting a product ready-made to be able to get that representation.
Mm-hmm. That's a great advice. Thank you. And so another question we have is from Vanessa. What do you do when what do you do when you have a creative block, when you can't come up with any ideas? So if either of you want to take this question.
Well, I can start, and I'm sure that Fabrice is going to have more to say than me, but like usually for me, the creative blocks usually comes with me to start working on a new story that we're developing with a cultural partner. So there are two aspects to it. The first one, because we are working directly with the users, it's a little bit easier than being an artist or being a writer, because what I do, I get children on the call or in the room, and I basically work with them to actually create the ideas based on some of the hallmarks that we would already identify with a cultural institution. So I'm taking the audience feedback and seeing your end audience and seeing your users actually fuels you, and it makes you feel inspired and makes you empowered to create. But when we are talking about more kind of one-to-one creative block, when it's just like you and your computer, because I still need to write the script, I still need to think about the characters based on what I've had, I usually take a break, because I feel a lot of creative blocks come from pressure and expectations that you're putting on yourself. Take a walk, take an extended walk, like don't just go for 10 minutes, like take an hour off and just literally walk together with your thoughts, try to refresh. I have a husky, so for me, it's kind of a daily routine. The husky drags me out of my house, but it really helps to connect with yourself without the technology, because the amount of the information that we are receiving when we are looking at this computer, when we are having this creative block, is already too much. So try to unplug yourself.
Great.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit. I think everything that Olga is saying is spot on. And I feel like for me, and to add to what Olga is saying, is I think when I have a level of creative block, I feel like it's almost as if I've lost this sense of curiosity. So I feel like it's, how do you work to cultivate that curiosity again, that sense of magic, because it can be zapped out initially. So I think that's on that front, I'll say, but there's also a sort of mechanical response to, because I know there's a lot of people that say that creative blocks don't exist, writer's block don't exist. I've heard that a lot of the times, and I'm not necessarily sure if I agree, but I think it's valuable to engage because I feel like sometimes, yeah, when I do sit down and I'm like, for example, I think it was Neil Gaiman in his masterclass, he was saying that when he goes out in the rule, like to write in a cabin, he has this rule that he says, he's like, I'm either going to do nothing at all, not check his phone, not go out, walk, nor eat food. No, he's gonna do nothing at all, or write. Those are the only two. That's his sort of his radical rule. Like for this day, that couple hours, he's only gonna do either nothing or write. And I thought that, and I've tried it, and I think it's an interesting exercise. I think there's a lot of different exercises you can do to sort of trick your mind, because we are biological creatures. So I think, like Olga said, taking a walk outside changes my sort of mental state. But I think at the end of the day, it's figure out your psychology as well, because I think just that little tiny vibrational shift can like transmute your thoughts. So it's all about like sort of like, it's like if I'm stuck, I can watch a comedy thing on YouTube, or if I'm stuck, I can do this. So I think there's a lot of different things you can do to curate this sort of curiosity of experience.
Great. And don't allow the block to become a blockade. I heard Fred Lebowitz once said that, and yeah, that was funny thing. So another question is from Irene Stepanian. Do you find being in the age of digital tools and virtual reality helpful for your creative process, or on the contrary, more distractive?
Obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I'm working with virtual reality. I would say it's a great tool that can inspire you to look at things from a different perspective. There is a fine line between just wasting your time and actually trying new methods, looking at new work that you would be able to experience otherwise, and finding the ways to get inspired. And the same applies for the digital tools. There is plenty of augmented reality and digital installation that you would see online that you wouldn't be able to experience otherwise. So I think it's an endless sort of inspiration. At the same time, I think that sometimes the amount of this inspiration, it's like quantity versus quality. You can spend all day being inspired and not do anything about your inspiration, and well, the day has gone by and you haven't done anything. So I think that, yeah, you need to find the line between utilizing what you have and not just binging on the inspiration available to you nonstop.
Yeah, great. Fabrice, what's your take?
I absolutely agree. I think I love feeling inspired so much. I always say I'm cursed by inspiration, and like too much inspiration, I think, can feel great and you feel like superpower, but at the end of the day, it's like you have to shift gear. It's like a car, it's like you have to shift gear. But I'll say that I think we are living in some of the greatest times as well to be your cultural entrepreneur. And I think that you literally can message anyone around the planet within like an hour or less, or even instantaneously. So I feel like there is incredible power to using digital tools to get your ideas out there. And I think someone might even say it's easier than like 50 years or 60 years ago with the access of people. But I feel like all of this might not mean anything if you don't have sort of the underpinning values of like perseverance, or even putting yourself out there and like reaching out to people that you might never want to reach out, because it's out of our sort of nature to like do something we've never done before. But I think the times demands it. But I think digital tools with the right mindset and the right energy can create a revolution.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And I think we have time for one more question. And I'm going to ask a question by Zebo, which is, what should I do if I want to change, but I don't know what my niche is? How do I choose a problem to focus on? What is the first step in this journey? Olga, do you want to take it on?
Yeah, I can start. So in terms of like that's the most popular question I usually get from people who are looking to start a business. Where do I find idea? How do I decide what to focus on? What is my first step? And I think I'm gonna second what Fabrice said earlier on in our conversation. The first source for you to find an idea that you'd like to focus on is actually focusing on your lived experiences, because you will get some competitive advantage in terms of understanding that this problem actually exists and having some insight into what kind of tool could potentially solve it. And after you carry out your user research, so this is your first step in a journey, see what really annoys you as a person, where you would like to improve. If you don't have a particular industry you would like to focus on, because that's the second approach I'm going to talk to, and then see if other people have the same problem, as it will be the beginning of your user testing. This is enough to start your entrepreneurial journey and keep on building slowly. There is also a great book called Disciplined Entrepreneur. I almost forgot the name and I thought it's going to be so embarrassing now. But yeah, it's called Disciplined Entrepreneur. And it basically lays out the journey for you in terms of what kind of questions, what kind of activities you need to doing to validate some of your assumptions. And then the second way that I feel is a little bit closer to me, because I'm not a child. I'm not struggling with lack of engagement with culture institutions, but culture institutions, museums, heritage site is something that I truly believe should be accessible to more people. And I've seen that there is less and less people who are appreciating the value of them. So for me, it was like Musemio was inspired by me knowing that something I really care about is not being fully understood by the new generation, let's say. And that's what kind of inspired me to start digging further and seeing how I can make a solution to improve it. So that's a slightly different approach. But after that, yeah, find your users, see if there is a problem. If there is a problem, continue doing step by step, and you're on your entrepreneurial journey.
Great.
Absolutely. I'll add to this. I think the cultural institutions here in LA are like the major production studios, whether it's Disney, Warner Brothers, or even the publishing organizations like Random House. I think for me, how I found that idea is like I didn't see representation as well. A representation in terms of like people that look like me. So I think the work of Syllable is really, how do we create a pipeline of diverse talent so their stories can be heard, whether it's from emerging markets, whether it's Black, white, LGBT, women, non-binary, or from different emerging markets. So I feel like this is sort of the work that has me in terms of my greatest vision. But I do feel like on the most granular level, one thing that you can do is you can spend a week to come up with 100 business ideas. Literally, like, have a small notebook throughout the day, throughout the week, just write down 100 ideas, and then and then after you've done that 100 ideas, cut down process of elimination, that your top 10 that do it, and then pursue those top 10 simultaneously. Do extremely small experiments with people in terms of like the change, the product that's rising from that. Since I think I took a program, I think it was the Alt MBA with Seth Godin, and our first exercise we did, we created 99 businesses. And that was such a radical shift for me, because it kind of going back full circle into Olga saying that not to get attached to the idea, but to get attached to the mission and the problem that you're trying to do, because that's going to have different face in terms of what, because it's like knowing those values. So I think when we did that exercise, we had to create the value proposition, the business name, and a description of what we would do with the market. So like a 6 bullet point business plan, but 99 times. And then from there, we narrowed down. So I think doing this exercise like this can also help you sort of to see what's there. And also, I think this can be a collaborative process too, because I know early stage folks who are looking for new ideas, it's much more powerful when you're working with other people to do it. And you might find co-founders and make the journey worthwhile even more. So yeah, on that front, the front of the cultural institutions and change, that's something that I value in terms of the pipeline in Hollywood. And then secondly, it's the process of change within generating new business ideas.
Great, thank you both. And I think our last question will be from Shushan, who is a participant of Artbox. And Shushan refers this question to Olga specifically. So can you tell us a bit more about your social entrepreneurship model?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's quite simple. As I said, we are a limited company, meaning that we can generate revenues, and we can raise money, we can take equity money, we can take grants. We are not a charity, we are not a community interest company. However, because of the way the business is operating, because of the values that exist in our business, we are a social enterprise by Article of Association. So Article of Association is a guiding document for your company that measures out some of the rules. And one of the rules for us is to create social impact. What's very interesting in terms of the actual practicalities of it, we do a lot of pro bono work with children of coming from less privileged background. We are bringing Musemio to schools. We are thinking very seriously about digital poverty whenever we are trying to create the experience, because we are still producing something that is quite high end, even though we are using the cheapest headsets available that are $5. Even though we are accessible on most of the phones and most of the tablets, we still understand that there is a segment of children that wouldn't be able to access it. And for us, it's very important to design the distribution models in a way we can actually target those children that wouldn't be able to get it otherwise. So it's about the way you operate and the way you prioritize your distribution, keeping in mind what are your values. Now it's going to take a slightly more, I guess, official level. We've secured investment from a social impact fund earlier on this year. And as part of our commitment, we need to produce the impact report back to our VCs, talking about what social impact that we are producing and how we are actually measuring it. So that's kind of like a different strategy. A different way forward would be being a charity or being a CIC. But with CIC and a charity, you wouldn't be able to raise equity money, and then equity money allows you to scale. And because we are dealing with a quite complicated technologies that are always changing, there are a lot of upfront development costs. So for us to grow as quick as we want, we do require the private funding.
Great. On that note, I think we can already slowly wrap up our conversation. I want to thank you both for joining us today. It was incredible to, first of all, have you both meet two Forbes 30 under 30 entrepreneurs, and then have give a chance to our audiences in Armenia and around the world to get some gems of wisdom from you, and know the journey that you went through. So thank you both for that. I want to thank also our interpreter, Rafik Santrosian, who translated in his Shakespearean English for our Armenian audiences. And I also want to thank our team for the hard work in bringing this together. So again, if you are here and if you like the conversation and would like to see more of it, please consider donating to our foundation. You can find all the relevant links in the comments section. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much to you both.
Thank you, Anush, and thank you, Fabrice, for a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Anush. Creative Armenia, this is amazing.